Hello, good evening. So today we are looking at the Change Dropdown commands. There are actually three commands: Change Dropdown, Change Dropdown 2, and Change Dropdown Random. So the Change Dropdown was the first one that was in place, and then we introduced Change Dropdown 2, which adds another option. So the first thing to understand, this is to select data and stuff in an HTML dropdown. So that's what you see here on the right side, Volvo, Saab, Mercedes, Audi. That is a dropdown, right? It looks like this in the source code. It has a select and it has options. So you specify the element with a regular XPath expression. As always, ensure that it's unique, that you only have one match. Otherwise, the whole stuff might be messed up. And also be aware of frames and iframes, because there's a different process how to select elements in frames and iframes, but I will cover that in the advanced tutorials for iframes and frames. So what's the difference now? The regular change drop down is actually doing the same as the Change Dropdown 2 when the select by is inner text. So the first version of that dropdown command was only able to look at inner text. So as you can see here in that example, the inner text in this example and the value is the same, but that's not always the case, right? So here the inner text is Volvo, the inner value is Volvo. The only difference is that the inner text names have the first letter capital, and here the value, everything is lowercase. So that dropdown 2 was added by feature request from a user, because there were some scenarios where it was hard to use the inner text to select a dropdown element, and it was easier to use the value to do so. Maybe there were some duplicates or whatever. That doesn't really matter. But so you can use the dropdown if you want to select Saab for example, right? Sorry, I have to close that first. So run it. As you can see, Saab is selected. Now it's exactly the same when you use this one, right? We select data Volvo. The element to change is actually the same. Be aware that if your XPath expression does not start with 2 slashes like this, you always have to specify X double point. Otherwise, it will not be recognized as an XPath expression. There's also an option set that's covered in the frames and iframes tutorial as well, because that's a little bit doing some different stuff. But in our example, there are no frames and there are no iframes, so this does not matter. So now we selected inner text here. So that's, you can run that, selects Volvo, you can run the other one, select Saab and Volvo. So dropdown 2 with select by configured to inner text is doing exactly 100% the same like change dropdown does. Now there are 2 more options. You can use value. Now value, we need to use the value name here. What is in value, right? So we run it. Oh, it doesn't work. Why? It's Audi. But it's lowercase Audi here in the value field. So you have to use a lowercase character. As you can see, it now selects by value and it looks for Audi. And as we just saw in the example, it's important that it's case sensitive, right? So now, depending on your use case, if you can select the element by the inner text and that works for your use case, you can use change dropdown. It's still in there for compatibility reasons, because some users might still have that in their code. Change Dropdown with inner text does exactly the same. But you can now also use value, or you can use index. Right, so what does index do? You can run it, and it starts with 0, right? That's the first index. And then we have 1, right, which is the second one, and 2 and 3 and so on. And what happens if we select the wrong one, 5 for example, we run it, nothing happens because it's out of index, right? Let's see if that's actually reflected in the debug message. To see if there's some info about that. Okay, here, error new data is not a number only. Oh, let's see, maybe that's a clean debug log. Okay, so now debug log is clean. Let's run that one again. New data is not a number, only numbers with index. Okay, the message is a bit confusing, I agree. We'll check that, but that's probably what we get back from the browser engine here. But it actually just means that the index is out of context, right? Because there are only 4 elements in that dropdown. That means Volvo 0, Saab 1, Mercedes 2, Audi 3, and everything else you use here as an index is not going to work. If you specify 3, it selects Audi because that's the last one, 0, 1, 2, 3. Now, random should be kind of obvious, right? You can run it and it will just randomly select 1. Of course, could be that it will select the same one multiple times in a row because it will always pick a random one. And random from 4 elements could be 3 times Saab, right? That's still selecting something random from 4 possibilities, right? The more options there are, the less likely it is that you will see the same one very often after each other. But if there are just 2 options, just from poor statistics and chances, it could be that it will show you 10 times Saab and then 1 time Volvo and then 10 times Saab again. That's just how random works. Okay, so that being said, I think we covered everything that is related to the change dropdown command. Thanks and have a nice day.